Thank you, guys. Some of our band members are not regulars, and so they came in today and are helping us out, and so we just appreciate all that. They've done a great job. Isn't that amazing? They've been great. Praise the Lord. So I wanted to just take a moment and sort of introduce this event today with you, tell you a little bit about myself, and then we've got a couple of special things planned for you. Before we pull up our panel today, we have some special guests there that I'm going to be introducing to you here in a moment, and we're going to be interviewing them and getting into some questions and things like that, which is just going to be a lot of fun. But my name's Chris Engel. I am the pastor here at Bible Fellowship Church. This is my third Sunday. Wow. Man, we handed out dollar bills in the parking lot. That worked out pretty good. So, no, this is only my third Sunday on staff here at the church, and I'm just super excited to be here. I've been serving, or working, I should say, as a school psychologist in the Hemet Unified School District for the last 4 years, and then I was in Temecula before that, working as a school psychologist, and before that, I worked in churches and did some ministry things. And someone came up to me recently and they said, someone that I work with, one of my colleagues, and they said, "Chris, are you leaving the district because you're disgruntled?" And I said, "No, actually, I'm not disgruntled at all. I actually really enjoy my job, and I'm going to miss it. Like, there's things about the job that I'm really going to miss." And I was sharing with our people several weeks ago when we started talking about the Reawaken Hemet event. And I feel like God led me to do this event today. And here's the reason why. I want to take you back several years to World War II, 1941. In 1941, the United States was bombed by the Japanese in Pearl Harbor. And they almost completely devastated the naval fleet, the Pacific Fleet. The only ships that survived were the aircraft carriers. Everything else was gone, or sunk, damaged beyond repair, or damaged to the point where it would take months and months and months to repair them. And the United States was knocked back on its heels. And I feel like that is the state that we find the church in today. And I feel like it's the reason why our nation feels like it's in a mess, because the church has been knocked back on its heels. Some churches have decided that they're not going to fight at all. Some churches have said, we're throwing in the towel, we're just going to coast along, and we're just going to do what we've always done, and that's the way it's going to be. And I've been watching this from the outside. I've been, watching things sort of unfold in our nation, and I couldn't sit on the sidelines anymore. And God sort of worked out some things here at BFC and brought Tammy and I and our family here to the church. And God led me to say, all right, I'm going to resign from my position at Hemet Unified. I'm going to take on the lead pastor position here at the church because we're not out of this fight. The admiral for the Japanese Navy, after they bombed Pearl Harbor, he's quoted as saying this. He says, "All I fear we've done today is awaken the sleeping giant." And that's what happened in 1941 in the United States of America when we were knocked back on our heels. And so my prayer and my hope is that, we've been knocked back on our heels. We've just come through a pandemic. We've seen a decline in churches. We've seen a decline in the families in America. We've seen these terrible things happening. And we've been knocked back on our heels. And we've been knocked down, but we're not out of this fight. And so it's time for us to reawaken again. It's time for us to say, we're not going to give up. We're not going to lay down. We're going to reengage in the fight. We're going to take the gospel message to the world. We're going to love as God's called us to love. And we're going to be His witnesses and His ambassadors in the world. I had a meeting about 3.5 weeks ago. It was actually the last meeting I had at Hemet High School. That's where I've been for the last 2 years. And one of the things that we do at Hemet High School is we hold these things called SST meetings, okay? An SST meeting is sort of a precursor meeting when a student's been identified as having struggles or challenges in school. They're failing. We have serious concerns. We schedule an SST meeting, which brings in sometimes the counselors, teachers, administrators, and sometimes the school psychologist. And I always like to attend these meetings, and so I would go to as many as I could. And just about 3.5 weeks ago, we had a meeting for a girl at Hemet High School, an SST meeting. And I'm so busy throughout my day. I got meetings and meetings and meetings, and I'm doing things. And I usually, before the meeting, I'll finally get to the emails, and I'll read through sort of what's going on and what's happening in this child's life, and so I can be a little prepared when we get into the meeting. And this particular girl at Hemet High, she's not unusual. She's not unlike any other girls that we've heard, but I wanted to share her story with you just briefly because she represents the students that live right next door to our church here, those kids that live in our valley. And in a greater sense, she represents the children that live in our nation. And so I came into that meeting, and Mom was there, and obviously we're doing these virtual meetings, and so everyone's there, myself, the counselor, the administrators, teachers, and Mom. And she logs in virtually, and one of the first things she says is, I'm in hiding right now. I'm living out of the city. And so I'm logging in from somewhere else. And I won't tell you where that is because she is literally in hiding. And she's in hiding because her husband, actually I don't think it was her husband, I think it was her boyfriend, had become violent with her. And they had been living through these cycles of abuse in their life and in their home. And her daughter, who we were meeting for, was a victim of this abuse. She had been sexually abused, she had been physically abused, and she was a mess. Every diagnosis you can think of, she had just recently received over this last year. From PTSD to major depressive disorder to generalized anxiety disorder, all those describe this young girl. She'd been in and out of the mental health hospitals. She had attempted suicide multiple times, and she was a hot mess. And I can't tell you how many meetings I've had with students this past year who are in the same boat that she is in and out of hospitals, attempted suicide, and are what I would classify in general terms, this is not a psychological term, but they're a hot mess. They're a hot mess. And the mom says, I just recently regained my sight because my boyfriend threw bleach in my face, and I was blind for 2 months. And we're afraid for our lives, and we're in hiding right now. And I tell you that story because our nation we're in a hot mess. We're in a hot mess. And I've asked my niece Abby to sing us a little song this morning, and I really hope that this song blesses you. And so Abby, would you bless us?
Everything's gonna be alright, she whispers to herself. She was only 6 years old the night she hid behind that shelf, 'cause Daddy had a little too much to drink, and Mama didn't want her to feel the pain. And she fell, but she still felt the pain. Well, 10 years they came and went, and Dad was gone. So she looked for love in other men and tried to act strong. Oh, broken hearts and scars in only places she could see. 'Cause she just wanted to feel something. And as she lay there in her bed, thinking about what those girls said, tears streamed from her eyes. She cried, if there's a God out there, please hear my prayer. I'm lost and I'm scared, and I've got nowhere else to go. I've come a long way, but I'm not sure I can make it much farther. So if you're listening, could you give a helping hand to your daughter? Well, her past started to change. She reached out and grabbed God's grace, and finally she saw the light. Until the night when she decided one drink was alright, and one thing led to another. And the next thing you know, 9 months go by and she's a mother. And as she laid there in that bed, stroking that small angel's head, tears streamed from her eyes. She cried, if you're listening, could you give a helping hand to your daughter? Well, that baby grew into a boy who became her pride and joy. He loved her like no man could, and her heart felt peace, 'cause she finally understood God's love. So as she lay there in that bed, 99 years old, she grabbed her son's hand and said, there is something you must know. There is a God out there who heard my prayer, and I was lost and afraid, and I had nowhere else to go. I had no clue what to do, and then he sent me you. So if you're lost and afraid, and you feel so alone, don't worry, child, 'cause there's a Father who will love you as his own, just like he loved his daughter, like he loved his daughter.
So God tells us in his word, he says this: Father to the fatherless, defender of widows, this is God, whose dwelling is holy. God places the lonely in families, and he sets the prisoners free, and he gives them joy. Listen, we are tracking something that's extremely alarming in our nation today. It's what I classify as a masculinity deficiency. That's my psychological term for it. But what it really means is that the men have sort of disappeared. Where are the men? Where are those men in World War II that said, we're going to rise up and fight? You may have knocked us back, but we're going to win this war. Let me give you some statistics that are actually pretty crazy and alarming. Statistics on men in America. Suicide among men is on the rise, and they're tracking this. Public leaders at all levels are focused on improving girls' experiences and ensuring their success, and boys are being left behind. The average American man dies 5 years before the average American woman, likely due to addiction. In New Hampshire, 73% of overdose deaths are men. 77% of all suicides in America are committed by men. Did you hear that? 77%. 90% of those who are incarcerated are men. 70% of all prisoners grew up in fatherless homes. 80% of all rapists grew up without a father. And boys are falling behind in school. More girls than boys graduate from high school, and considerably more go to college and graduate. Women decisively outnumber men in graduate school, including law school and medical school. 71% of all high school dropouts grew up without a father. 63% of all teen suicides are teenagers who did not have a father. 40% of all children in America are born into a single-parent home, and 72% of African American children are born into a single-parent home. 1 in 5 boys has been diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and many are medicated, and we still do not fully understand the effects of this medication. In 2018, there were 7 million working-aged men in America who were without a job and who were not working. Single men are more likely to live with a parent than a spouse, but that's not the case with young women. Single women buy their own homes at nearly twice the rate as young men. And 1 in 5 American children live only with their mother, which means millions more boys are growing up without fathers. The majority of managers in the workplace are women. Women are now scoring higher on IQ tests than men. Almost half of young men fail the Army's entry-level physical fitness exam during basic training. And by the way, this is interesting. Doctors across the nation are tracking a decline in testosterone levels in boys and in men. And they're also tracking a decline in the sperm counts among boys and men. It's an unexplainable decline. They don't know what's contributing to it other than the fact that there's been, in my mind, a cultural shift that's taken place in America. And men are becoming less masculine, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. College and universities have women's empowerment groups where they focus on overcoming masculinity and its impact on our culture. There's a phrase that's been adopted as mainstream and become part of the ideological fabric of our society, and it's the phrase toxic masculinity. You've heard it. It's out there. One wouldn't imagine using the phrase toxic femininity or even admit that it exists in our culture, but almost anyone you talk to in the academic world widely accepts the idea that toxic masculinity is systemic and it exists in our culture. And so masculinity is under attack. And by the way, it's not just under an attack. There's a full-on waged war in our nation against masculinity. Is it possible that this rhetoric, that this movement is contributing to what I call a masculinity deficiency in our culture? The message that boys are being told from day one is that masculinity is bad, and that the innate desires and qualities that they were created with, i.e. strength, courage, sort of that warring nature that's put inside boys, it's why they turn everything into a gun when they're little, that they're actually terrible qualities. That's what we're being told. And if you feel this way or you engage in these activities, then there's something wrong with you as a boy. Maybe in a desire to bring women up, we've actually brought men down. And we've destroyed what is good about masculinity. Where are all the good men? Where are they? I know there's single moms and single mothers out there, and they're asking this question. All over the country, they're wondering the same thing. Where are all the good men? Where have all the good men gone? I worked at Diamond Valley Middle School for several years. It was one of the school sites that I was assigned to. And I got a phone call one day from a grandmother who was raising her grandson. And she tells me just briefly the story of his life, and it was a horrific story. She tells me about how he lived with his mom, who was a drug addict, who had a boyfriend that was abusive. And she told me that he had been, at one point when he was young, he had been chained to the tree in the backyard by the boyfriend in order to manage his behavior and keep him out of their hair. And so I showed up at Diamond Valley Middle School one day, and I sat in my car, and I was journaling, and I would always get there a little early, and I sat in my car just talking to the Lord about the day. And I wrote the words in my journal that day, "Today I plan to meet the boy who was chained to a tree." What do you say to a boy who was chained to a tree? Send him to the school psychologist, they say. He'll know what to do. And so the weight of that was on me as I was tasked with the job of assessing this young boy and determining how the school could help him in his life. And that boy represents many boys in our country who maybe not physically have been chained to a tree, but who have nonetheless, because of words that someone has said or because of the culture itself, have found themselves chained to a tree. I want to invite our guests up. This is a perfect segue, but I want to introduce them to you, and then we're gonna actually talk to the principal of Diamond Valley Middle School. So would you guys come up? John Dombrowski, he's a Hemet police officer. Come on up, John. Carly Myers, our mayor. Mike Percival. Mike Percival is my good friend. In fact, when I was imagining Reawaken, I actually called Mike first and said, hey, Mike, what do you think about this idea? Do you think you'd be willing to help me with this? And Mike says, yeah, I'd love to do it. I'm on board. You want to meet the mayor? And I said, yes, I want to meet the mayor. And so Mike set up a meeting with Carly and I. And so, but anyways, just thrilled that you guys are all here. And I've never done this before, by the way. Had a panel up here and interviewed people. So this is a first for me. I feel like I should be like on some, Fox News channel or CNN or just sitting up here, like where's the cameras? But anyways, I appreciate you guys being here. And so, John, I shared that story because you have been working and serving as the principal over at Diamond Valley Middle School. I left Diamond Valley right before John came. That wasn't intentional, by the way, but it just sort of happened that way. And I transitioned over to Hemet High School. But John, would you just share briefly with everybody where you've worked in Hemet, sort of where you've been and what the future holds for you?
Sure. Thank you all for just allowing me to be here today. And I think if I was on a channel, I appreciate that. It's a friendly church.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, and just to be clear, if I was on a channel, I'd want it to be the Food Network, right?
Right on.
That would be the best place.
I'm with you.
I am very fortunate. We moved around a lot as a kid, but I'll start my journey when I was 14. I joined up at West Valley High School, proud Mustang, graduated from there, and really enjoyed my time. But I saw some gaps in Hemet. And as I went through my educational journey and got the opportunity to become a teacher and a coach, I always knew that I wanted to come back to Hemet to be able to maybe close any gaps that I saw when I was here. And so I was fortunate to be able to do that. Got a chance to serve at Rancho Viejo Middle School as the principal for many years, and then most recently at Diamond Valley. And in the future, I'll be moving over to Human Resources at the district office.
Yeah, John just got hired a couple weeks ago as the new director of Human Resources for Hemet Unified. So that's pretty amazing.
By God's grace.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. John, you and I have talked about the challenges that educators are facing today and some of the challenges that we see in our valley. What are some of those challenges? And, what do you think are the underlying contributing factors?
That's a really good question. Let me just start with what the problem is not. There are fantastic kids in the Hemet San Jacinto Valley. I have loved the kids that I've had the chance to serve inside of our valley. They are curious, they have big hearts, and they need people to lead them. They need dads, they need teachers, they need support people. And I would say that probably one of our primary issues, if we're going to go to statistics, when I was a kid, way back in, the statistic was that there were about 4 adults outside of the parent that were positive, prevalent people inside of a child's life. The most recent statistic shows that as less than 1/2 of an adult that's present. That means when I was a kid, I could call my aunt, my uncle, I had a grandparent that I could go to, I had mom and dad in the home. So I knew that there was always somebody that I could go to. And I think probably one of the most challenging things for our kids today is with both parents working and just trying to pay the bills, and a society where, kids don't get to go out and ride their bikes anymore. You don't go spend the night at a friend's house. We all kind of exist in this culture of fear. Our kids are very disconnected. They're disconnected from each other. They're disconnected from the adults, and in many ways they're disconnected from the community. They can have thousands of friends online, but not one real friend in real life that they can go to and talk to and cry with and just be able to have a good time with. And so when you put 40 of them inside of a classroom together, that can create some real problems. It creates social anxiety for kids. It creates challenges for teachers that grew up in one generation, and so they want to shake your hand and look you in the eye. And then you have kids today that don't look anybody in the eye, and they don't want to communicate. And so it creates this barrier where The adults feel like the kids are being disrespectful, and the kids are just scared to death to connect in any way. And it's really tough to build a school community, when the kids are not connected. I think another major issue, and you touched on it already, is just fatherlessness. I've been in schools now for more than 20 years, and the number of kids that I see in homes where the grandparents are raising the kids, or where it's a single-parent home and the dad is just not present. These are problems, because then when you need to discipline a child, they're not used to being disciplined. They're not used to a man telling them, no, son, you can't do that. No, you can't talk to a lady that way. No, you can't raise your voice at anybody that you want to. And that starts in the home. So when they don't get that in the home and they come to school, it makes it challenging for the adults that are working inside of the school. And I would say probably our last primary challenge in schools is just, I think there's a lack of trust and participation. School used to be a community thing. I remember as a kid going with my mom to PTA meetings, and the multi-purpose room was packed out, and those ladies had potlucks, and I mean, you didn't mess with a PTA mom because they ran the school, And I can tell you that today, unfortunately, those things just don't happen. The multi-purpose room sits empty, and there's sort of a distrust, I think, that exists between the school and the community at times, and for any number of reasons. But if I could give you an encouragement, it's show up. There's plenty of space in the multi-purpose room for you. Come in, be active, and be involved.
Thanks, John. So how can churches in our valley, and honestly, BFC's represented here today, but how can churches sort of help with fixing these problems or address the problems that we're seeing? Do you have any thoughts or ideas about that?
Absolutely. I would say a couple of things. Number one, don't be afraid to go down and talk to your school leaders. Go down and talk to your school principals. Make yourself available to be at school board meetings. And if you have the time, run to be a school board member. Run to be involved in your local community, whether it's Chamber of Commerce. The more active the church is, the more present we are, then we have a voice at the table where decisions are made. And oftentimes we focus so much on national issues and on the national election, but the reality is if you want to change things as a church and as a body, that starts by being involved at the local level. So please get yourself involved in local PTAs, volunteer at your kids' school. I know the kids are all cringing right now because the last thing they want is mom or dad in the classroom with them. But I'm telling you, you have so many rights and privileges as parents that oftentimes we don't take advantage of. There are actual laws that allow you to take days off of work to participate in your kids' education, to participate in meetings and to volunteer. You have to look into those things and make sure you take advantage of that.
So, Carly, do you want to say
I have one
something?
more thing I want to add to that, too, is as a church and as a community member, when you're out at the grocery store and you see kids by themselves, instead of staying in your comfort zone, just say hi to them. You don't know when you're going to run into them again, and you don't know the influence that you'll be. And so as a church, that's just another way to engage.
Well, and I love what you said, John. You said that the kids aren't the problem. And I think so many of us, we look at our community and we think, well, there are a bunch of hoodlums running around out there. They're the problem. And I think that's a great perspective. And
I can tell you that the folks that work inside of the school districts, they are working so hard to love and care for our kids. But, I think about it like I think about faith. It's almost like, I learned the analogy of the three-legged stool, that you have to pray, that you have to fellowship with believers, and you have to read your Bible. If you do those three things, your stool will be solid all the time. You can sit on that thing, it'll never break. Your foundation's good. But with kids, schools oftentimes are the one leg of the foundation. And so when you get the chance to encourage your kids' teachers, to encourage those people that are working with your kids, please do that, to speak life into them, because every challenge that Pastor spoke about this morning, those are things that teachers are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And the emotional toll that it takes on a teacher to have kids in classrooms that are battling through those things, it's extremely difficult. Other statistics would be the burnout rate of new teachers. 35% of new teachers that join the profession are gone within 5 years. They just can't do it. Because they went to school to teach English, and they ended up being the psychologist and the psychiatrist and the dad and the provider of food and all of these things that they didn't initially sign up for. So the more you can encourage the educators in your life, please do that, because it matters. And that starts with praying for them. I don't know if you do that already at home, but when you say your nightly prayers, pray for your kids' teachers, because they have a huge influence on our kids. So it starts with that.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Awesome. So I want to ask you a question, Mike, and sort of transition a little bit here. But Mike is a veteran. I've known Mike for a long time. Mike served in the Navy, and then when he left the Navy, he was a police officer in Chula Vista for a while. And so, just real briefly, Mike, I know you've gotten involved in politics here in our valley, and I'm just curious, what motivated you to do that?
Great question, and thanks for allowing me to be here today, Chris, and your congregation. Really appreciate it. There's been a lot of things that have led me in this direction. When I was in the Navy, I was in kind of a leadership role. I was in law enforcement in the Navy also, and so it gave me the opportunity to teach and these young kids that are new in the Navy. I mean, they're young, under 25, and I would, it's when the big holiday weekends would come, and it's get up in front of a group this size and have to tell them, hey, don't do this and don't do that, and we want you back to be able to serve.
Right.
So that's one of those steps. I look at my life as a puzzle, and everybody that's been involved in my life has been a piece to that puzzle that God has created. And so you've been one of those influencers. My wife has been an influencer. My in-laws have been influencers. So there's been a lot. My real estate career has been a big influence. I had the opportunity being as a director for the Association of Realtors, the local association, and also a director for the State Association of Realtors. Gave me the opportunity to go to Sacramento and see how a trade organization interacts with the state legislature, and so that was kind of a driver also to be able to be part of that. As John mentioned, get involved locally. That's what I did. So I started out as a planning commissioner in 2012. Was on the Hemet Planning Commission for 5 years before I got elected in 2016. So that's kind of been my journey to get to the council and be an elected official.
Awesome. Yeah, so those of you that don't know, Mike has served on the Planning Commission. He's also served on the City Council and lost a pretty tight race just this last year, and then has served as the mayor as well on the council. Mike, I want to transition because I think a lot of our people here would be interested to hear some of the things that you know about sort of the overall development of our community. One of the things that I've learned from Mike is that this is something I think that he's interested in, but having been on the Planning Commission and then part of the council and being a real estate broker in town, he's got some insight into these things. But let's talk about real estate just for a minute, because
It's on fire.
Yeah, so we're in a boom, right? I mean, this is a boom.
Yeah, we're seeing prices what we saw back in 2006, 2007 in our valley. There's a lot of drivers to that. COVID being one, and when COVID first hit and the big shutdown, there was a lot of question on what was going to happen to the housing market. Is it going to die? I know a lot of realtors that lost transactions. People got cold feet and backed off, and sellers even took their houses off the market because they didn't want to have people walking through their house and have a possible exposure. So in the very beginning, we didn't know, and then as time started to go by, people were now working from home, and their home accommodations weren't fitting that need, and so people are selling there. Now there's a big frenzy to sell smaller houses and upgrade and move to different locations. So there's people didn't have to commute to LA or San Diego because they're working from home. So that's been a lot of the driver.
And what about inventory? You would said something to me about just the amount of inventory that's present within just this valley right now.
Yeah, the inventory is low. So if you look at from a supply and demand perspective, the supply has been very low, based on the number of sales per month and the number of new listings going on the market. The inventory has been less than a month at some point. So right now we're at about a month and a week, so 5 weeks inventory, or five week supply if they were to all sell.
Got it.
And no new properties were to come on the market.
So speaking of that, how many new properties, new builds, how much development is projected in Hemet? What can you speak to that?
Not near enough. There are a few developments going on in Hemet, not just in Hemet, but all over California. When the governor was first elected, he had high ambitions to get 3 million housing units built. Even in 2006, when housing construction was booming, the highest that was ever achieved was 1.5 million. And so part of that driver is labor. So when you don't have a labor force that can build that kind of, get that kind of construction going, it makes it very difficult for new construction to happen. And
Got
then
it.
now with COVID, I mean, there's people that are out of work and not wanting to go back to work because they're still collecting extra unemployment. So, the private sector, it's hard to compete with the government when the government's giving away free money.
Got it. So, did you want to say something, John? Yeah, maybe? Okay. He's figuring out how to turn this thing on.
Yeah, I just want to make sure my microphone's on. Free money.
Very expensive. Free money.
I got you.
Very expensive free money.
I got you. So, what is the price of a house in Hemet compared to neighboring communities? Are we still cheaper than other communities?
Hemet is still cheaper. The main driver for lower housing prices in Hemet is that the houses in Hemet are older and smaller than even San Jacinto. Looking at last month's numbers, the average age of a house was 1985-ish built, and it's their 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,800 square feet is the average size, versus San Jacinto, the average square footage is about 2,200, and 1995 to 1997 age year built for homes.
Got it.
So that's one of the big drivers on why Hemet is cheaper. And there's a lot of senior community, a lot of smaller senior housing in Hemet, which
Yeah.
also keeps that. But housing prices this time last year are up 22% from this time last year.
Yeah, I've seen that with my own house. Have you guys seen that? If you own a house, your house has gone way up in value. It's been pretty incredible to watch. So how long is this going to last?
I don't know. If I had a crystal ball, right,
Yeah.
I don't know. Some of the projections are it could be 5 years. It could be longer. Interest rates are still, I don't want to say at all-time lows, but they're still very low, close to that all-time low range. So with interest rates being low, demand still being high, I don't know. I mean, they're not building enough housing to keep up with that demand. But people are moving out of California too, so that will help alleviate some of that. But still, again, it could be 5 years, it could be 2 weeks. I don't know. I mean, it's just public policy has a lot of influence on what happens in the housing market. So if there's a big policy shift at the federal level, it could have implications. But we're not seeing it just here in Hemet. I mean, it's across the United States that housing is going.
Well, I know there's been a shortage in lumber. I've seen some of the reports of that. So there's been a supply and demand issue with just building materials themselves. Yeah, and I've seen some of that too being reported. And we're experiencing inflation, which I think is probably also contributing to the rise in houses, the cost to buy a house.
Yeah, lumber in itself is up 60%. So that's just an added cost that builders have to take into account on when they're going to build and how they're going to build.
Yeah,
And
crazy.
it's tough with housing prices being lower in Hemet. Builders don't want to build as much here as they do in Menifee, Temecula, Marietta, Riverside.
Got it. So I want to shift just for a second and move more towards the overall planning and development of our valley, because you got some insight on those things. You and I have talked about the Highway 79 realignment. There's also some other future plan developments as far as creating some freeway access through Hemet. You want to briefly just bring everybody up to speed on where that's at and what that looks like?
Yeah, so Highway 79, the Highway 79 realignment is a realignment from Dominigoni Parkway and Winchester Road to connect to Ramona and Sanderson, Lambs Canyon, going up into Beaumont. It's already been approved. It was approved in December of 2016. The environmental impact report has been completed and been approved. The problem is money. Mm-hmm. So the Riverside County Transportation Commission is the biggest driver behind it. So they're the agency that's going to be pushing to get funds to it, but it's low on the priority list. They've already allocated funding to the Mid-County Parkway, which is Ramona Expressway. They've already started work at Ramona Expressway and the 215 to get that all ready for that expansion. So the question is when the funds will be available. It could be 10, it could be 20 years before that becomes a priority.
So how do we encourage that to move a little faster?
Get involved. push city council, yeah, you're not even on.
Because I get a vote on that.
Yeah, she's not even on RCTC. So push the council member that's on RCTC, which is right now it's Linda Krupa. Go to the RCT meetings. They're held at the County Board of Supervisors meeting room. So it's get the voice heard. There needs to be that push to get that project at the top of the priority list.
And do you think that will help bring some economic life to the valley and improve some of that?
Absolutely, because it's Hemet's not a transportation corridor like Menifee or Paris or Moreno Valley. So we're not going to get that, the manufacturing like that, because we don't have that transportation. When Highway 79 realignment goes through, it'll make it easier for north-south, but we're still looking at, the east-west transportation. Hemet's like a cul-de-sac. We're stacked up here against the mountain. There's limited access, and it's not, there's no freeway access. So that's one of the difficulties.
Yeah, and I know back in the day that was the appeal, right? So all the retirees came to Hemet because you could just kind of be in this place and it was safe and beautiful and there wasn't a lot of traffic. I mean, there was no traffic actually if you lived here back then, but things have changed dramatically.
But it's still that place.
Yeah.
It's still a place to be where you don't have as much traffic. I remember when I first moved to Hemet and I was commuting to San Diego, I could get down to Chula Vista in about an hour and 15 minutes. Now it takes 40 minutes just to get to the 15 freeway because of all the development and the construction.
Yeah, Tammy and I call Florida Avenue the parade route. That's kind of our term for it. We, if you get on Florida, you're in for a parade. You're going to be there for a while, and there's going to be opportunities for you to wave as you go down the street. And so I wanted to ask you some questions because I think this is interesting. There's this misnomer out there about sort of the riffraff in our valley. Some people believe that criminals are being relocated to Hemet specifically. There's that message that's out there. And then also, and I've heard people say this, that there's billboards in Los Angeles that are telling people to relocate to Hemet. Have any of you guys heard that? Anybody heard someone say that exists out there? But I want you to speak to that for a minute and just let us know. So is that true? And, are criminals being relocated here? And what is all that?
There's no billboards. I have yet to see one, and I've yet to see anybody provide proof of one. What I can, from a housing perspective, right, it's cheaper here. So I can let Carly and John talk about, the criminal element in that. But as far as housing goes, people want to go where they can afford. And if Hemet is cheaper, especially regionally, Hemet's cheaper and it's more affordable, people are going to come here. so that way they've got more money at the end of the month. And that's with anybody. Nobody wants to be house poor, whether it be rent or a mortgage. So people go where they can afford, and I mean that's what brought me to Hemet is affordability, and that's what brings a lot of people here. So that's one of the biggest drivers is affordability. But as far as the criminal element, I'm sure Carly has more to say about.
What about hotels and motels? You said something interesting to me about sort of a dynamic that exists within some of the motels in our valley.
So some of the motels, their livelihood is by taking vouchers from the county. And so and Carly can touch on this too, but that's how they, I mean, let's be real, none of us would go to some of these motels just because they're it doesn't meet the standard that a lot of us are accustomed to, right? So they get they take in they give assistance to the county by taking people in that are being released from different programs, and so they accept those vouchers. The last statistic that I heard is that there was only hotels in Riverside and Hemet that were accepting the vouchers. So you can correct me if that's been changed, but so that's how a lot of these
So other hotels and other
their
communities,
business, and that's how they
are
stay in
not
business.
there. It's just the owner's choice.
It's the owner's choice.
Yeah. Got it. And so other communities like Menifee or Murrieta or wherever, Paris, Temecula, those business owners that own those hotels have made the decision, we're not going to accept those vouchers.
Correct. And it's even when I was on council, we'd get the blame, like Hemet in prior councils. Hemet made a deal with the county. Well, no, it's the business owner, the owners of those hotels and motels that are the ones that are accepting it. It's not the city going to them and saying, hey, you need to accept this. That's not how it's gone down.
Yeah, so maybe there's opportunities for us as a church and believers to strategize ways to impact those people, because I know, John, there's a lot of transiency with students in the district, and we know the district has identified a lot of students that actually are living in hotels. I actually met one of those students this year and completed an evaluation for a young boy who was living in a hotel with his mom and his siblings. And imagine this, by the way. You're living in a hotel room. I mean, it's a room. And you're in a virtual setting. So you're having to attend class on your Chromebook in one room, and two of your siblings are also attending class at different schools at the same time in a hotel room. And that was the experience of this boy. And we wonder why they're struggling in school and why their grades are poor. And so that's a real thing that exists within our valley. And I know the district has seen that too.
They have, and I would say the question for the church, when we know that exists, God doesn't make any mistake with who he brings to the valley. And if you look around the valley and you see the number of empty seats, I believe God's preparing the church in our valley for whoever it is that God brings in for an outpouring of his Spirit, and lives can be changed and restored and redeemed, because he's the same God yesterday, today, and forever. Same God who brought dry bones back to life. So if God brings him here, what's the responsibility of the church with the people that are here, now that we know that?
Awesome.
And I look at that as opportunity also. That, it's opportunity for us as a community to engage. And Carly hit it on the head, is that when you see those kids, say hi to them. Make it a positive experience as opposed to, oh, look, they're a bunch of hoodlums. No, they're kids. They're out. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I was out riding my bike with my friends too. It's their kids being kids. We need to let them be kids, but let them know also that, hey, there's people out here that care about you.
Right. Yeah, and they're grinding with their skateboards on our curbs and on our rails. But, that's what kids do, right? I mean, Carly, I want to transition to you. I'd like for you to just share with us. And by the way, I told Carly this earlier this week. I said, Carly, your story is fascinating to me because she was a stay-at-home mom and homeschooling her kids. And I coined your journey as from the living room to the boardroom, because you made the decision one day that you didn't want to just stay at home anymore and you wanted to do something. I want you to just share with everybody sort of that journey for you. Like, how did you end up as the mayor of Hemet?
Well, I was a homeschool mom. I also was homeschooling a friend of mine. She had passed away from cancer, and so we were actually homeschooling her son also. And the significant morning, and this is probably the straw that broke the camel's back, was there was a time that I had to wake up every morning and check my cameras because there were people in my yard every single night. And I'm not really the kind, I know I look out here and I see some of you that I know, but some of you that don't know me, I'm not really the kind that just sits back and lets things happen. So I was watching my cameras one morning and there was a guy in my yard. He was over a fence in my garden. And I went outside. I didn't really have anything to grab except this gift that my children gave me for Christmas. And I think they gave it to me because of all of the activity that we had in our yard at night. It was a stick with a rock taped to it. And so it was awkward, but that's all I had. It was by the front door. And so I went outside and we ended up wrestling around the car. And I heard there's a video somewhere if you look around, but it's entertaining. It was a time when I just decided that enough was enough. We wrestled around the car and, of course I can't advocate for anybody else to do this, but that was just my gift. I ended up jumping on his lap, and don't think for a minute that I wasn't thinking the entire time. I actually imagined my legs like flopping out the window as he drove off. He started the car, put it into drive, and I'm on his lap. And I shoved it back into park and did the old, you don't know what you're gonna do. You don't know, I'm not trained like he's trained. And I gave him the old uppercut with the elbow to the neck and took his keys. He ended up leaving. It was a citizen's arrest. But that was a time for me to decide, I was in control of my world. I was in control of, my kids' education. I ran like a homeschool program for a bunch of other kids. We did a co-op. I had a lot of things going on. That's what I do, but it was in my world. And I didn't really engage in politics. I didn't like it. I didn't care about it. And I didn't feel like it made a difference. And so I did what I did. So it kind of started there. A friend ended up running for a county supervisor, and I helped him with his campaign. During that time, getting to know the people in Hemet and the politics in Hemet, I just saw so many things that needed to be fixed, and I'm a fixer. I'm probably like over the top fixer, overcommitted, and I can't let it go. And so.
And you wrestle with people out in driveways. Yeah, the riffraff.
Yeah, so that was nothing running.
Yeah, don't mess with the mayor,
office.
right? Yeah.
So that's kind of how it started.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. So you just got reelected in your second term on the council, and you've been elected as the mayor. So what is your plan? How are you approaching your job as a council member, as a mayor? Do you mind just sharing with us some of the things that you're thinking? What's happening in Hemet? How are you? What is your plan to instigate or to institute change, appropriate change?
Well, how I see it is, and everybody wants the political answer, but if you sit back and look at our city in particular, our city is sick. Our city has a heart problem, and our city has a real big disconnect. There's been a disconnect over the years between local government and the citizens, and I feel and I've seen, and looking back I see even more, hindsight is everything, that the elected officials have kind of told the people that live in our city to stay in their bubble and we'll take care of it, and we will stay here and you stay there. And so when that happens, that's not how a community runs. That's not a healthy community. So then we have all these silos and everyone trying to do things, but nobody's working together. This year, I think that addressing these issues in the community, addressing issues of the heart, have to be the first priority. And even, I've got to tell you, since January, there has been group after group. I remember seeing one Saturday, there was over 12 different groups out doing cleanups, ministering to people, getting homeless off the street, and it's about time. And it's kind of a call to action for the citizens, because to be a community, we have to join hands. We have to work together. And so, we can have all the plans in the world, but like Mike said, if they're not funded, they're going to sit in a notebook in the office. And to have action, it's going to start with the people, because the people want change. They have to stand up and make change. 5 people sitting up on the dais every 2 weeks we set policy, but we can't make anyone do anything. And so that's huge.
I think that speaks to me, because honestly, I think that a lot of people feel like that it should be a top-down fix, that we should elect somebody into office and then expect everything to just fall into place and get fixed. When in reality, what I hear you saying, Carly, is that our valley is sick, and it's not sick because of the 5 people that sit at the top. It's sick because of everything else down at the bottom. And in order to fix that, we as the citizens of this valley need to get involved. You just graduated from a class yesterday. Tell us about that.
My daughter and I graduated from a trauma intervention program. It's called TIP. And starting July 1st, actually, our police department and fire department will be using TIP to respond. And we're volunteers that respond to traumatic experiences that happen in our valley. It just happens that they didn't have anyone on call last night, so after we graduated, I went on call at 6:30 for 12 hours. We did have one call, but the job of a TIP member is simply to care. We're not there to go in and cure the situation. We are not there to tell them that they're okay, because they're not okay. They're not feeling okay right now. Somebody just passed away. But our job is to just care. Now, the most exciting thing about this class, we had 11 volunteers from Hemet sign up. There will be another class in, I believe, September. But with Hemet joining TIP, I mean, this started down in Oceanside 36 years ago. It is an excellent program, but it is a way for people, because everyone asks, how can we get involved? There's ways for everyone to use their gifts to get involved. I mean, whether you want to work with homeless, you want to work with these families that are going through some tragedy. There's a way for everyone to get involved. So this was
awesome,
amazing to learn about and to go through.
Yeah, I heard about that from Carly, and we're going to get some information for our church, because I think it would be great for us to put it out for you guys, and maybe it's something that I can do. I think I was telling you, Carly, I don't know, I was talking to somebody about it, but that's my area of expertise. That's what I do. I mean, that's what I do. That's what I've been trained to do, is to respond to these crises, and it's a passion of mine. And so I think as a church, that's definitely something that we can come alongside and partner with this organization in impacting our valley. So anyways, thank you. By the way, if you don't know this, we don't have a lot of time for Carly to explain everything she does, but she is probably one of the most involved community leaders that I've ever met. She's out all the time. I mean, she's talking to the homeless. She's talking to criminals. She's volunteering on Saturday mornings, cleaning up the valley. She just graduated from this program. Is going to be volunteering her time to help in crises. You should be proud to have Carly as your mayor. Yeah, we should all be proud. So I just want to encourage you, Carly. You're doing a fantastic job, and we're proud of you. And I'm privileged to have you here on our stage today. We want to support you in whatever way we can. And I know there's been some tough decisions made, even recently regarding our city attorney. There's been some changes. There's changes coming, you guys, and they're not sitting around anymore. And I had the privilege of praying. Carly asked if I would pray open up one of the council meetings a couple weeks back, and I'm telling you, Tammy and I sat there and watched citizens come in that were on fire, and we're calling out people by name. There is a movement that's happening, and so it's an exciting time to be a part of that group, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And God is a God of order. And I feel another thing we've done this year, and just quickly, we actually had a strategic planning session. We haven't had one of those in our city for years, and for whatever reason, the leadership, maybe they were just always putting out spot fires, but I feel like to move forward, you have to have a plan as far as what strategy are we going to do to address these issues. So community was big on that list, just so you know.
Awesome.
And
Yeah.
July 1st will be our new budget. I'm not going to say whether I'm going to pass this one or not, because I've only passed one of the last 4 as far as my vote. But I have expectations, and hopefully July 1st we can start actually seeing a difference.
Awesome. It's going to be exciting to see you wrestling the other council members. Do you bring that stick with you? I mean, when you go to meetings?
It's still by the front door behind the chair.
Spare the rod, spoil the child. Yeah.
I know, right? Listen, I want to transition to John, Officer Dombrowski, but before I do that, I have some gifts for you guys. And I wanted to do something special for you, just honor you for being here today and for being on our panel and being community leaders. So we had a little gift made for you. There is a box here. On the box, it has the scripture reference, John 8:36. John 8:36 is Jesus quoting, and basically he says that if the Son has set you free, you are free indeed. And inside of this box is a coin, okay? It is what we call a silver round. It's 1 ounce of pure silver. And there's a picture. You guys can see it on the screen here. There's a picture of Lady Liberty, and she's looking up into the heavens at the word freedom. And so you guys are all ambassadors of freedom in your own right. And God has put you in special places of leadership and influence. And we just want to bless you as a church and encourage you. And so we want to give you guys, each of you guys, one of these special coins just
Thank
to
you.
say thank you. And they have their names
very
engraved
much.
on the boxes as well. And so, anyways, God bless you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to transition to John as we kind of wrap things up. I know John hasn't had a lot of time to speak, and we're going to have him back, right? We're just going to have him back. But John's been serving as a police officer here in Hemet. John and I got to meet John because of Jonathan Workman here, and John has shared with me sort of his journey of coming to faith in Christ, and I just asked him if he would share that with you. We don't have time for him to talk about some things in the department and stuff like that and those specifics, and I think we're going to have him back. But if you can catch him before he heads out, maybe he'll give you some interesting stories. But John, would you share with us? You told me a story just on Thursday. John and I sat down in my car in the parking lot at the library just before he started his shift. And we spent about 45 minutes together talking, and he shared with me some pretty powerful things that happened in his life, even as a young boy. And that's kind of the theme today, at least from my perspective, is that there's a masculinity deficiency in our world, and boys are being left behind. And I recognize that girls are being impacted too. But I think the alarming thing is the boys. And your story is pretty powerful. So tell us about your time in Anaheim, where you grew up.
Okay, I was born in Anaheim, Orange County. Speaking of like homeless kids in motels, I was one of those kids. There's actually a documentary I just learned about this. It's called The Homeless Kids of Disneyland. There's a bunch of hotels near Disneyland back in... Oh, I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, literally almost eat the mic. Okay, so I was homeless growing up as a kid. There's a documentary about the hotels I used to live in. I just learned this recently. It's called Homeless Kids of Disneyland. I remember a couple of their names, the Pitcairn, the Golden Forest. Those are places where I grew up. We actually were homeless. Now we're like actually sleeping out in the wilderness. I thought I was camping. Later in life, I found out, no, we were homeless. As a kid, it was great. It was fun. Dad, mom, drug abuse, dad in and out of the home, be gone for 6 months, 3 months, 4 months, then he'd come home. What my saving grace was, a bus would pick us up, and I'm like 5, 6, 7 years old. And I don't remember no permission slip or anything like that. We just get on a bus and we go to church on Sunday. And it took me away from my reality. And then I learned about Jesus and God. And I believe it saved me. At that moment, God was with me all the time, and he protected me. Even when I distanced myself, I separated myself from him. He never separated from me. When I was in high school is when I started going away from God. I started that separation, with teenage years. I know it all, playing sports. Everybody knew who I was. I liked the popularity. I was at my high, I thought. And I started working shortly after that, going to school, going to college. I dropped out of college to work 2 jobs so I can get my own place. And from there, I worked in the mortgage business for 11.5 years. I did well there. Everything I ever wanted as a kid, everything I dreamt of, became true. And only to find out that it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't everything I thought it was going to be. It was only good for a short period of time. And I went away from God so much I didn't even believe in God anymore. And I was already a cop at this time. And when I least expected it, God found me. He woke me up. And I remember I was at my house, and I just couldn't shake the idea to go read the Bible. I never really read the Bible before. I just go to church, and I listen, and I followed. As a little kid, they want you to remember Bible verses, so I would remember, so I get a prize. So I went, and I obeyed, and I read for like 3 to 4 hours. But everything I was reading, he was speaking to me, and I finally realized what he meant. Like, he wants us to build a relationship with him. He wants us to get to know him. And I realized how merciful he is. I realized what real love was. And it wasn't I thought I loved my kids. It's greater than that, and it's better than that. And he's a merciful God. I didn't feel worthy, and I asked him, why? Why me? And it's because he loves us, and that's why we love him. He basically showed me all the things I went through in my life growing up in the motels. There's a lot. And he basically was telling me, look, give it to me. I allowed you to make all your choices. I've never separated from you. Now give all that bad to me and make it good. And now I'm able to do that with the job I'm currently in, and I believe God placed me there where I'm at today. It's just a very, very overwhelming, very humbling experience, very humbling. And what I got out of it was, I fought all my life. When you grow up in places like that, you got to fight to survive, or you won't survive. And I was like, I don't have to fight anymore. I just got to be a light in the dark. It's a dark world. It's a very dark world. And I could either be a light or not. And knowing the truth, I can't choose not to be a light. And that's where I am today, and I hope that you guys get something out of it. But
Awesome. Thank you, John. Appreciate you sharing that story. I have a lot of questions for you. We run out of time, though, but I just appreciate all of you guys being here. I do want to just say to you out here today, just sort of piggybacking off of what John shared. Maybe you're here today, and if you were to sort of take just sort of an inventory of your life, you might say to yourself, yeah, I've been fighting to survive. I've been fighting to survive. And what I thought I would achieve at this point in life, I haven't achieved. Maybe for you, it's just that you're lacking that feeling of purpose and happiness. And you know that something's missing. And so I don't believe that you're here by accident if that's you. I think God brought you here today. And he brought you here today for me to tell you that, number one, that he created you for a purpose and a plan in your life. That you weren't an accident, that God has a plan for your life. And you're special and you're important in him. A lot of people think that in order to come to church or to come to faith in God, they got to clean their lives up. That's actually the exact opposite of what God has asked you to do. He's not asking you to clean your life up and then come to Him. He's asking you to come to Him, and then He's going to clean your life up for you. And so if you're here today and your hesitation is that, no, I've got all these problems, I've got this addiction in my life, I've got this issue. If that's your hesitation today in coming to Him, I want to encourage you that you probably aren't going to be able to fix that, but He can. And so you need to come to Him, and now's your chance today. And so I just want to pray for you if that's you today. So would you guys join me in prayer? Lord, I just pray for those who are here today that maybe that's them. Maybe that's where you are today. And I just want to encourage you. I just want to tell you that God loves you and that He has a plan and purpose for your life. And maybe you're realizing today that something's missing, and that piece that's missing is a relationship with God. And so we have a cross on the stage behind me here, and that cross is empty, and it's empty for a reason. It's empty because the one who hung on that cross, the Son of God, Jesus, He gave His life on that cross for your sins. The Bible tells us that He died once, and He died once for all. And that if you would believe in Him, that you would be saved. And so there was a price that was paid on that cross. It was the price for your sins and my sins. You see, in order to spend eternity with a holy and righteous God, you must be perfect. You cannot be in the presence of God without being sin-free. And the problem is that none of us can live sin-free. We all sin and we all fall short of that perfection. But God has made a way for you to be with Him forever. And He made that way through the cross. The cross represents His love for you. It represents His grace. It represents a gift of eternal life. And all you have to do is come to Him. If that's you today, if right where you're sitting today, if you're like, Chris, that's me. Man, I feel lost. My life is a mess. I'm not happy. But I'm realizing today that I just need Him in my life. I can't clean this up. I can't fix it. But I think maybe He can. The Bible tells us that if you confess your sins before God, that He is faithful and just to forgive you and to cleanse you of all of your unrighteousness. And so if that's you today, I want to invite you to just stand up. Just stand up right where you're sitting. This is your chance to say, God, I'm all in. I'm all in today. I don't care what anybody else in this room thinks. It's not about them. This is between me and you, and I'm all in. I'm ready to give my life to you. I'm giving it to you today. If that's you today, I want to give you a chance to do that right now, just right where you're sitting. Just stand up. Just say, yep, I'm all in. I'm giving my life to Jesus, to the one who gave His life for me. And I'm going to trust Him with my future and with these plans that I've made or the plans He has for me. If that's you, you stand. Now's your chance. This is your chance to say, Lord, I'm giving you my life. You stand. Maybe you're watching online and God is speaking to you and you're saying, you know what, this resonates with me. I've tried everything else. I think it's time for me to try God and to give my life to Jesus. And if that's you, I want to invite you, just wherever you are, you can lift your hand if you're in the car. Don't stand. You can lift your hand. But make the decision today to give your life to Jesus. I just want to lead you in a simple prayer if that's you. And honestly, prayer is just talking to God. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. But you can just say, even in your heart and your mind, you don't even have to say it out loud. But you can just tell God how much you desperately need Him in your life. Thank Him for dying on the cross for you. Tell Him you've made a lot of mistakes. Ask Him to forgive you. And tell Him you just want to give Him your life today. Lord, I thank you for those who prayed that prayer. I just pray that you bless them today. May today be a mile marker in their life. May it be the day that they have discovered this wonderful gift, the gift of forgiveness, the gift of being right before you, of being loved by you, of having you as their Father, of being called your child. We love you, Lord. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.